Hello, fellow Americans, or whatever you consider yourself wherever you are. It is me, Josh Bloom, and if I am being honest, because if I'm not, what's the point? I don't really think of myself as an American. I think of myself as a human, and even thinking of myself that way is tenuous as hell. I am here, I guess, with consciousness, I guess, whatever it is, I am communicating with you, and if that makes me a human American, okay, I guess. What I know for sure is that it makes me connected, and I am grateful for that. This is the latest edition of the 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom podcast, the weekly compilation of my daily 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration posts that originate on TikTok and then are reposted on the other apps, short for applications, that are made by people, long for peeps, that you find on your phone, short for smartphone. You know, for the time, the avocado desk phone with rotary dial and curly cord was smart. Our technological past deserves dignity. By the way, this podcast is officially titled 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom because I was sick of seeing my face next to his name, which I am sure you can understand. Before we continue, please allow me to remind you to use the current iteration of the smartphone to follow the podcast on your favorite podcast playing application. And since you're already clicking, why not text a friend to tell them to listen to the show too? I had an encounter this week with a fellow human American that left enough of an impression on me that I decided to fill time here on the podcast telling you about it. What is the relevant connection, you ask? Well, this podcast and the series it is derived from is essentially about observing human behavior and how the people around us have an effect on our nervous system that we must process and potentially counter in order to remain mindful, optimistic, and hopeful. It just so happens that in this case, that person is the president, but this idea can apply to anyone who is crossing our path in life. I can't name names, but I did run into someone very, very successful by any human American measure, and after parting ways, I semi-obsessively started searching for current information to see just how well they are actually doing. I felt like I needed to get some perspective on this person as a person in order to allow myself to feel better in the moment about the person that I want to be for me and for the people, or you might say, the persons. The waste of time in this action, of course, is that any information I find on the internet to confirm or deny my assumptions of this person's success only speaks to their success on paper as judged by the projection of my own assessments of human American success. The point now is not to analyze what I found during my detective work. It is for me to realize that the successes we present to the world are presented to the world for that very reason. They are presentations. They are performative. Whatever is really going on with a person is unique to the person, but I can guarantee that those unique realities are not what is being put on display for easy access by some dude like me in a moment of self-doubt, because those realities don't shape the public narrative that the person wants to shape. Even my honesty about this idea with you now is its own form of manipulation. If you are thinking, boy, Josh is such an open and honest guy, well, good. That's what I want you to think. I hope you can accept that about me. Don't forget, if you want to watch the daily posts that comprise this weekly podcast in real time, you can do so on YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok if you're nasty. All of the links to my social media can be found at superjews.com. Substack.com. You can also watch on Substack, the platform where all of my long-form writing lives, including the illustrated posts that accompany my main podcast, named simply The Josh Bloom Podcast. Substack is a platform where writers can publish writing, which is then emailed as a newsletter to subscribers like you, so you have something to read when you really want to read something. So, when you hear me say, subscribe to my Substack, that means to go to superjews.substack.com and just enter your email address. Here we go. Subscribe to my Substack. Thank you so much. And now, let's get into 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. Days 355 through 361. This week on the show, on day 355, I confess that I may actually have something in common with the leader of the Trump administration, who I refer to on this day as Don. I talk about my struggles with sugar and compare it to what I see as his addiction to attention. I imagine a productive and compassionate conversation between us about unmet needs and coping mechanisms. Don't worry, though. I'm not that compassionate. On day 356, I talk about why I ignored the State of the Union address because I do not trust the dude doing the addressing. I also use this day to pay tribute to Revenge of the Nerds actor Robert Carradine and discuss how that film's very loud character Ogre reminds me of the more unhinged members of the leader's cult. Clap your hands, everybody. Everybody, clap your hands. On day 357, I talk about how people sometimes confuse actors with the characters they play. On this day, I use Ben Affleck's role as a bully in the film Dazed and Confused as an example and compare that to how supporters of the leader of the Trump administration may have confused his role as a billionaire in a boardroom on TV with the reality of his role as a destructive force on our nation. On day 358, I connect a childhood memory of a Beach Boys parody song about Iran to our present-day war there. I talk about how the leader of the Trump administration claimed to have halted that country's nuclear program many months ago, but oops, apparently not. Clearly, Donald's favorite condiment has been flying lately. On day 359, I remind you and me both, with my usual optimistic flair, that we are going to have to hit the bottom before we can start to climb back to the top. This thought emerged after I heard a follower of the leader of the Trump administration try to justify the bombing of an elementary school in Iran by suggesting the children might have grown up to be terrorists. Typical and typically deplorable. On day 360, I celebrate the firing of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and how moments of celebration during this administration tend to be short-lived because loyalty, not competence, is the only real job requirement. I apologize for using images of Krusty the Clown and a generic angry gnome because although I use them for obvious reasons, I also feel bad for demeaning Krusty the Clown and a generic angry gnome. On day 361, I talk about how the leader of the Trump administration seems to view who will become the next supreme leader of Iran like a game show where people either win or lose, and most people lose. I reflect on the tragedy of dozens of school children losing their lives in the leader's war of choice as he blames the press for reporting on it. I apologize ahead of time for dragging Bob Barker and Pat Sajak into this. For the last few weeks, I have forgotten to write this little quip that brings us into the main portion of the show until I had already started recording, but not this week, baby. I am sitting here at the P, and I have my daily donut by my side as a reward for when I am finished writing to you. I will be talking about my daily donut ritual and how it figures into my long-term weight loss in a book I am writing, but for now, let this dessert serve as more than just a sweet. Let it serve as a sweet segue into the show. I will be back, full of donut, on the other side. Day 355 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I have something in common with the leader of the Trump administration. I realize I give the impression that he and I would never see eye to eye on any issue whatsoever, but I do believe that if I had the chance to talk with Donald, he and I would get along fine. I think I can connect with who he is as a person, not to root out his failings, because there would be no time for that, but to be a compassionate ear, because I do not believe that anyone really listens to him. I believe that what he and I have in common is addiction. For me, this addiction is not to a substance that most people think of immediately, but it is an addiction. For me, it is sugar. I am telling you a story that is very real to me at this exact moment. I am stuck in the house because of the snowstorm hitting the East Coast, and earlier today I almost panicked because I have not had any sweets in a few days and I am craving them. I do not know if the leader of the Trump administration has a sugar addiction, but what I do know is that he appears to have an addiction to attention, and addiction is addiction. By the way, if we did meet, I would call him Don, because I do not think he is often referred to by that name, and I think he would like it. It does not matter what you are addicted to, so I would bring up my understanding of addiction, and I think he would take a breath and stop for a moment. I do not think he would fall asleep in our meeting. Tell me about that, Josh, he would say, and I would reply, Don, I know what it is like to be addicted. I feel like you may be addicted to attention. I do not think that craving is random. Sometimes when a child does not receive the attention they deserve, they develop an insatiable hunger for it later in life, one that is often impossible to satisfy. When you have a craving that cannot be satisfied and you do not want to become a total mess, you have to apply methods to manage it. What is that called? That is called addiction. And I believe that the leader of the Trump administration, Donald, or Don, if you will, would likely admit to this temptation. After we meet, he can go off to sleep and I can go back to ignoring the Trump administration. Day 356 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Tonight is the President of the United States State of the Union address. That is the official title of the leader of the Trump administration, President of the United States. And while I am quite interested in the actual State of the Union, I unfortunately cannot go to the President of the United States to hear about the State of the Union, because the President of the United States has long ago established that so much of what he says are verifiable lies. Now, you might say, Josh, you just don't like the leader of the Trump administration, and that is why you say what he espouses are lies. Well, you are right that I do not like him, but I also know that verifiably the man has been lying for a lifetime. But okay, that is what his supporters and followers expect, and that is what his supporters and followers want. So they are tuning in to hear those lies because it feeds a need. I understand. Since we're talking about a person who rarely gets to the point quickly, it is quite likely this speech will go on for hours. So, just as a practical matter, ignoring the leader of the Trump administration's speech is highly recommended. If you have not heard, the actor Robert Carradine has passed away today. He is the actor who played, among many other characters, the iconic lead nerd Lewis in Revenge of the Nerds. When I was thinking about Mr. Carradine today, it struck me that another character in the film, the character named Ogre, who famously screams the word nerds over and over again, reminds me of some of the followers of the leader of the Trump administration. If you are one of them, take that comparison as a point of pride if you were not intimidated by the word pride. By the way, let's not forget that Lewis and his best friend Gilbert formed a groundbreaking electronic group as part of that film's finale. That was awesome. I want to say rest in peace today to Mr. Carradine, who is not around to listen to the leader of the Trump administration's pack of lies this evening. Wherever he is now, I hope he has received his salvation. In his name, I will continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 357 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are smart. I saw a post commenting how recent interviews that Ben and Matt did together serve to remind people how they started their careers by writing an Oscar-winning script together and therefore proving their intelligence. I replied saying that some people seem to think that Ben Affleck is actually his character O'Banion from the movie Dazed and Confused, in which he played kind of a lunkhead bully who ran around with a paddle because he was a little overzealous about hazing high school freshmen. Some people fall victim to believing that actors are actually the characters they play in a movie or on TV. This is the case with the leader of the Trump administration and so many of his followers. They seem to believe because he played the character of Mr. Trump in the reality game show The Apprentice that somehow he is this genius businessman. Ironically, it looked like the boardroom in that show was actually made of cardboard, and the businesses that people point to as evidence of the leader of the Trump administration's credibility have often ended in bankruptcy, been sued for fraud, or were not even his businesses in the first place. He simply lent his name to them, kind of like he is attempting to do with the presidency. I am pretty sure that if he could call the country Trumpica, he would, and some of his followers would welcome it. Some then point to, well, he's a billionaire. I say this is where I start thinking about the word fraud. I could be misinterpreting my feeling that there is constant corruption coming out of the White House. But sometimes I swear I can smell the scent of books cooking. If a person has a history of convictions for fraud, maybe a forensic accountant should start doing the math. Just make sure you get paid first. This is to say, Ben Affleck is a very intelligent individual, unlike his character O'Banion, and the inverse appears to be true of Donald Trump. The character he played on The Apprentice of a successful, all-knowing businessman is not reflected in how he conducts himself as president based on my observations. Who knows? Maybe one day Ben and Matt will write a script about ignoring the Trump administration. Day 358 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. When I was 8 years old in 1980, there was a parody version of the Beach Boys song Barbara Ann that went, bomb, 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 Iran. This was in response to the ongoing hostage crisis. I never forgot that. So last year, when the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration bombed Iran, I was reminded of it again, playing in the back of my mind, but never did I think I would need to draw from that well again so soon, because the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration said that we had completely obliterated Iran's nuclear program. It was a done deal. When reports came out at the time contradicting this by saying that the program was probably only set back by a few months, the leader of the Trump administration sent the catch-up flying. This is, of course, metaphorical catch-up because I have no proof of actual catch-up flying, but we have heard the stories. They are oh so delicious, just like ketchup itself. Well, apparently those reports must have had some truth to them because as of last night, new military action has begun. Multiple outlets, including NPR, are reporting that a U.S. Israeli strike hit a girls' school in Iran and that the reported death toll includes dozens of children. The numbers appear to be rising. The leader of the Trump administration has claimed again and again and again that he is the leader who will not start any wars and will, in fact, bring peace. Today's news seems to contradict that statement. Look, I am not saying that I know anything about how to conduct international negotiations or warfare, but what I do know is that when bombs are dropped, innocent people suffer, and so I must implore. And I think you know what I'm going to say next because I just used a word that rhymes with ignore. Please stay mindful, optimistic, and hopeful that we will survive this presidency and be better for it. Because we will have learned what it is like to have a leader who appears to act with very little restraint. It appears that his only interest is escalation and taking us toward the bottom. And so, once again, using that word implore, I ask you to ignore the Trump administration. Day 359 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I am here today to say that even though we are in free fall and falling fast, we are not at the bottom yet because there will be more beyond what I am about to tell you. Yesterday, I heard a particularly deranged caller to one of the smart young political debaters here on this app. This supporter of the leader of the Trump administration said in regard to the bombing of a children's school, which killed dozens of elementary school-age girls in Iran, well, how do we know they would not grow up to be terrorists? Yes, this is where we are at. There are people who believe that if there is a chance that an elementary school-age child could grow up to be a terrorist, that is justification enough for the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration to bomb their school. Earlier today, the leader of the Trump administration was giving a press conference. He seemed jovial, an interesting posture considering what I just described. But is it? Actually, no. It is consistent with what appears to me to be detachment from the death and destruction caused by his decisions. I don't know enough to call this behavior psychopathic, but in fact, psychopathic is how the leader of the Trump administration was described in an email sent by the guy whose name we often see occur these days in front of the word files. During this press conference, the leader of the Trump administration acted like an interior decorator on an HGTV home improvement show as he stood in front of what will become the entrance to his grand ballroom, which is apparently going to be double the size of the White House itself. He was discussing drapes and his love of gold just mere hours after dozens of children were killed in strikes that he initiated. The word disappointing doesn't matter. The word disgusting doesn't matter. The word despair doesn't matter anymore. We must persevere because our patience is being tested. My patience is being tested, and I believe in this test. I believe that this test is meant to make me better. I honor the unnecessarily fallen by endeavoring to live a better life. They have paid the ultimate price to motivate my sense of self preservation. I honor them today by ignoring the Trump administration. Day 360 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. We are celebrating today the firing of Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem from the cabinet of the leader of the Trump administration. I apologize for including Krusty the Clown and an angry gnome here, but I think it is important to have some fun when possible to lighten the mood for a moment. Krusty Christie will forever have to put the word formally next to her name from now on and will no longer be traveling on her luxury jet complete with bedroom. I want to point out, however, that while it is a justifiable celebration, the sycophant who will follow is going to end the celebration of good times. Come on. As I have stated over and over and over again, the only criteria to be a member of the Trump administration is to be subservient to the leader of the Trump administration. Qualifications do not matter. Nothing matters other than subservience. The reason Ms. Noem lost her job is because in this week's congressional hearing, she did not lash out in defense of the leader of the Trump administration and, in fact, put him in an awkward position. This is why, for instance, Attorney General Pam Bondi has not been fired because, like Ms. Noem, although Pam has made decisions that some may call incompetent and corrupt, she defends the leader of the Trump administration at every turn. That is what he is looking for when he turns on his TV and cozies up to his bottle of ketchup. Donald wants to see the show that indicates that he is king, and Christie, unfortunately for her, did not deliver. I am only pointing out that we might want to curtail the glee that we are feeling only because it is important to remember that coming up behind Ms. Noem is the next sycophant. In this case, Oklahoma Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, who, despite being a former MMA fighter, cowered in the House of Representatives as Donald Trump's mob broke their way into the Capitol to crap and to spread that crap on the walls. As Krusty the Clown would say, hey, hey, kids, it's your old pal Kristi Noem, who is now headed home after losing her station. Perhaps she will shoot some dogs to help her heal and start to ignore the Trump administration. Day 361 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. Which potential Iranian leader will pony up the award that the leader of the Trump administration is looking for in order to be considered to become the next supreme leader of Iran? That sounds like a dumbass game show. It is. That's how the leader of the Trump administration looks at life, like a game show where contestants either win or lose, and in his world, they mostly lose. I apologize for dragging Bob Barker and Pat Sajak into this, but I thought a visual would be helpful. As U.S. service members die for no reason, because if the leader of the Trump administration were to be believed, late last year we had destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities despite news reports to the contrary. The Trump administration now claims, in its twisted state of mind, that the press only wants to make the president look bad by reporting on these deaths and others, like the dozens of Iranian school children who have perished, for example. Here is an analogy for the average supporter of the leader of the Trump administration. Pause if you need to look up the word analogy. Are you back? Great. This is like if someone murdered one of your family members, and by pointing out that this person murdered one of your family members, suddenly that makes you the villain because you're trying to make that murderer look bad. It is laughable at best and one of the darkest, most insidious realities of the time we are living in at worst. I received dozens of comments across several apps claiming that the school in Iran that received a missile strike was a missile strike caused by Iran itself. I deleted those comments because not only did I find them disgusting, but I also expected that these comments were being left by propagandistic bots, troll farms, or demented, basement dwelling, brain rotted supporters of the leader of the Trump administration. As it turns out today, I was right, because we now have reporting that indicates the U.S. did indeed, through the use of faulty data, drop the bomb on that school. Take no responsibility for it, express no concern, and certainly in no way apologize for this grievous error. Here's a comment that I would like to leave for the next generation. Please know that some of us ignored the Trump administration. Hi, it's Josh. It is unfortunate that I heard later about Bob Barker allegedly harassing the models on The Price is Right, which, while unsurprising, does make me less enthusiastic about apologizing for dragging him into my discourse. It seems like he made himself a candidate for dragging, frankly. No word on Pat Sajak's misdeeds, if any. By the way, I am still at the P, and I am not full of donut, and I will tell you why for the sake of the honesty I explained earlier as part of my way of manipulating you into believing I am a thoughtful guy. My friend here has arrived. He has his own daily sweet ritual, but because I consider him to be a more disciplined person than myself, I feel shy about eating my donut in front of him. I will wait until he leaves. I hope you can accept that about me. Thanks again for listening. Please leave a 5-star rating for the 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom podcast in your podcast app, and leave a comment saying that you like the show. If you feel like leaving a comment about the leader of the Trump administration with the words, "Burn in hell, dipshit," you go right ahead and do that. Please tell a politically curious friend about the show, and while you are at it, please follow me on all of my social media by going to superjews.com, where you will find the links that you are looking for. Lastly, if you would like to throw some support to me and the show, please subscribe to my Substack. Go to superjews.substack.com and just enter your email address. I would appreciate it immensely. You can also buy me a coffee. For a mere $3, you will earn my undying gratitude, or at least enough gratitude to last until the next time I ask you to buy me a coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Josh Bloom. Before I go, let me remind you what this show is for. We are living in trying times that are trying to take our time away from living. The goal with this show, beyond pure entertainment, is to reclaim that time, regain our minds, and focus on what is important. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I am mindful, optimistic, and hopeful, and I am glad you are here with me. See you next time. Bye.